The story begins with James, a 32-year-old photographer who receives an unusual invitation. He's been asked by the heirs of the Coldwell estate to photograph the property before they sell it. Coldwell House, a massive, ancient mansion, has been abandoned for years and is infamous for its dark past. Locals claim the house is cursed, but James, a skeptic, is more intrigued than scared. He accepts the job and prepares to spend the weekend at the house. James arrives at Coldwell House on a stormy afternoon. The house is a towering, Gothic structure with broken windows, peeling paint, and a long-forgotten garden overgrown with weeds. As he steps out of his car, he feels a strange sense of unease, like the house is watching him. Still, he presses on, excited to capture its decaying beauty. Inside, the house is cold and silent. Dust coats every surface, and the air is thick with the smell of mold and old wood. The power has been shut off for years, so he relies on his flashlight. The house feels almost alive with its creaks and groans, but James dismisses the strange sounds as natural for an old building. As James begins taking photos, strange things start to happen. He captures shadows in his shots that weren't visible to his naked eye. He hears faint whispers coming from the walls, and at one point, his camera inexplicably malfunctions. The unsettling feeling in the house grows, but he pushes on, determined to finish the job. After all, it's just an old house, right? That night, as James prepares to sleep in one of the old guest rooms, he notices a portrait hanging on the wall. It's a painting of Eleanor Coldwell, the last known resident of the house, whose tragic death sparked the rumors of the house being haunted. Her eyes in the portrait seem to follow him, and an eerie feeling of dread washes over him. But again, he brushes it off as an overactive imagination. That night, James experiences his first nightmare. In his dream, he's walking through the house, but it's different, alive with movement. He hears footsteps behind him, but when he turns, no one is there. Suddenly, he finds himself standing in front of a locked door at the end of a long, dark hallway. A deep sense of terror grips him, and as he reaches for the doorknob, he wakes up, drenched in sweat. The dream leaves him rattled, but he tries to shake it off. After all, it's just a dream. Or is it? The next day, James explores more of the house, taking photos of every room. He comes across the locked door from his dream, located at the far end of a hallway. It's old and heavy, with a rusted keyhole, and there's no sign of a key anywhere. The door gives him an eerie feeling, but he shakes it off, determined not to let his imagination get the better of him. He tries to open it, but it's sealed tight. For a moment, he considers breaking it down, but something stops him. A sense that he shouldn't, that whatever is behind the door is better left untouched. That afternoon, James decides to take a break and digs into the history of the house. He discovers that Eleanor Coldwell was found dead in the house in 1947 under mysterious circumstances. Her husband, Richard Coldwell, had disappeared years before, and Eleanor's death was ruled a suicide. However, locals believed something far more sinister was at play. Some said Eleanor went mad, claiming she saw dark figures in the house that no one else could see. Others believed the house itself drove her to her death. As he reads this, James starts to feel a growing sense of unease, as if the house is reacting to him, learning its secrets. That night, the disturbances escalate. As James walks through the house, he starts to see shadowy figures out of the corner of his eye. They disappear when he turns to face them, but the feeling of being watched grows stronger. The whispers become louder, and he hears footsteps following him wherever he goes. James tries to rationalize it. It's just an old house settling, nothing more. But deep down, he knows something isn't right. Later that night, James experiences his first direct encounter with the supernatural. As he's photographing the grand staircase, the temperature in the room drops suddenly, and he feels a cold breath on the back of his neck. Turning around, he comes face to face with a ghostly figure, a woman in a long, tattered dress, her face pale and eyes hollow. She whispers something unintelligible before vanishing into the darkness. James is left frozen in place, heart racing, as the reality of the situation finally sets in. Coldwell House is haunted, and whatever is inside doesn't want him there. Panicked, James digs deeper into Eleanor Coldwell's diary, which he finds hidden in the library. The entries reveal that Eleanor was tormented by the spirits of the house, particularly by a dark entity she referred to as the Watcher. She believed the Watcher was responsible for her husband's disappearance, and that it would eventually come for her too. In her final entry, she writes, "I can hear it now, watching me from the shadows. It's always there, waiting. I fear I won't last much longer." James realizes with horror that he too is being watched. That night is the worst yet. The house becomes alive with activity. Doors slam on their own, the whispers turn into screams, and shadowy figures dart through the halls. James locks himself in his room, but it's no use. The lights flicker, and the temperature drops to freezing. Suddenly, the door bursts open, and the figure of Eleanor Coldwell appears again, this time more real, more menacing. She whispers the same phrase over and over, "He's coming," before vanishing. The Watcher, whatever it is near. James finally pieces it all together. The house itself is cursed, and the Watcher is a malevolent entity that feeds on the fear and souls of those who inhabit it. It took Eleanor's husband, drove her mad, and now it's coming for him. He realizes he has to escape, but the house won't let him go easily.